and the Masters of the Universe.
Welcome to the He-Man episode reviews. In these videos, I'll be looking at single He-Man episodes from across the first season of He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. And also, since making the top 10, I realized that there is a Season 2 box set. I have ordered it, and I will be bringing up my opinions on it a bit later. But let's start with today's episode review. Whenever we rate anything, we tend to do it on a scale of good and bad. When something is especially good, we call it excellent. When something is especially bad, we call it awful. When something is good but not especially so, we call it okay. And when something is bad in a disappointing way, but not too much, we tend to call it mediocre. But then there are some things that have something good and something bad about them, and that's what we call a mixed bag. The She-Demon of Phantos is a mixed bag of a He-Man episode. I was contemplating on having it as an honorable mention on both my top 10 and bottom 10 He-Man episodes lists, but both times I had to abandon it because I didn't feel that it comfortably belonged in either list. But that's not because the episode is only okay or mediocre, it's because some things about it are really good, some are really bad, and others are just plain dumb. Let's begin with the story. This episode starts off with Adam and Duncan fighting each other, which is kind of rare to see. However, it turns out they're only testing out Photanium, the strongest metal in the universe, which is made on Eternia's moon of Phantos. However, what Adam and Duncan don't know is that Queen Elnora's aides are being held captive by Skeletor, and that they're actually taking a shipment of worthless metal ore back to Eternia. Elnora defies Skeletor, and he binds her to his will with a spell that also turns her old and ugly. Later, the heroes discover that the Photanium is breaking easily, and with the help of the sorceress, deduce that Elnora is being forced to work against the heroes. At first, she uses her powers against the heroes, who go to Phantos to free her, but eventually she begins to regain control of her mind, which is when Skeletor uses a spell that makes Elnora see He-Man as Skeletor. However, Elnora is able to deduce Skeletor's real identity, partially thanks to the help of Teela, who follows He-Man and Duncan despite being told to stay behind. The story is definitely the best aspect of this episode. It has multiple interesting narrative angles to it, and although it starts off as your typical Rescue the Princess story, I like that it's Elnora who technically frees herself from Skeletor's power, which is an interesting development. For its story writing alone, I would have liked to have put this episode on the top 10, but as I said, other aspects of the episode weren't handled nearly as well, which is why I couldn't really give it that kind of recognition. Now, as for the characters, we'll start with the villains. Firstly, Skeletor's pair of lackeys is a really odd one. We have Merman, who I don't think has any business being in this episode to begin with, since it's not even a water-themed episode. Thankfully, he has no dialogue. Secondly, we have the one-shot villain Strongarm, who's just a completely pointless figure. Something you notice with almost all of Skeletor's one-shot henchmen. Really, this duo doesn't add anything to the episode, and I would have much preferred it if Skeletor had brought Beastman and Trapjaw with him. But even more odd is the collection of heroes this time. Now we have the series regulars, He-Man, Duncan, Battle-Cat, and Teela, but then, bringing in reinforcements, it's Stratos and Lizard-Man. Now Stratos is actually one of my favorite He-Man characters, but I also think he's the worst utilized character from the series. There are only about 3 decent episode appearances by him, and the rest of the time he only gets to do one of 2 things. Either he shows up for an incidental action scene and says nothing, or he delivers some dialogue and doesn't get to do anything. Even considering that, She-Demon of Phantos is undoubtedly his worst appearance, since immediately as the heroes make it to Phantos, Elnora captures both Battle-Cat and Stratos. What the shit? Okay, I don't mind Battle-Cat, but why have Stratos along at all if you're just gonna have him captured and put away for the rest of the episode? Why Stratos? Why not the completely pointless supporting character you brought into this one episode? Speaking of Lizard Man, there's really not much to say. He later made an appearance on the episode Song of Solace, where it was shown that he was actually a decent jumper and could climb on walls, kind of like Spider-Man. And much like Duncan, Battle-Cat, and Stratos, he does absolutely nothing in this episode. He doesn't even sound like a lizard, more like a parrot.
Well, we better think of something fast. They know we're here now.
He's just some more dead weight for the heroes to lug around. This is probably my biggest gripe with the episode. Though the writing and character interaction is pretty good, the writers clearly had no clue which characters to focus on and just threw in too many unnecessary ones. He-Man, Duncan, and Teela would have sufficed, and if they needed someone to get captured that badly, then maybe Battle Cat, but not Stratos. The guy gets enough crappy appearances as it is without this completely pointless one in this episode. Now finally, let's talk about the animation. Here the episode is definitely at its peak in the mixed bag department. A lot of animation in this episode is actually really good. It seems the battle scenes in particular were done well, especially at the end when He-Man and Skeletor are fighting. In fact, this might be the only decent fight He-Man and Skeletor have in Season 1, which is really saying something. However, then the animation department suffers from some disappointments. My biggest one are all the spell effects on Elnora. Rather than backlighting, Filmation decided to just use normal white animation cells, which don't look bad, but they also don't look nearly as impressive as the backlit effect would have. Also, the middle part of the episode suffers from some pretty dodgy animation moments. Even when the heroes disguise themselves as workers, the robes they're wearing look like they were just laid over the normal animation cells. To top things off, even the comedy is a mixed bag. Although I thought it was a little unfair that Teela is forced to peel potatoes as a punishment for disobeying her father at the end of the episode, it's a rather endearing moment. I mean, God, how many times do you get to see He-Man characters peel potatoes? But at the other end of the spectrum, we have the episode pre-commercial break cliffhanger. He-Man gets shoved into a Photanium body cell. Both the villains and the heroes think He-Man is trapped for good when they've exhausted all their tricks to break open the body cell. And just as they're about to leave home defeated, this happens.
Now, here's the plan.
What the fucking shit? So, He-Man could have broken free at any time, but instead he decided to wait around to make a dramatic exit? That's just plain old retarded. What the hell was he doing while Duncan and Teela were trying to get him out in the body cell? Did he take a nap? So there you have it. She-Demon of Phantos is one of those episodes that I really like, but can't really recommend due to the abundance of stupid shit that goes on in it. However, I think it's an episode that deserves to be discussed, and I thought doing it in the form of a review was the best choice. See you all in the next review. I have the power, so can you.